Alrighty then, hello everyone and welcome to this video. In this video I'm gonna talk about the code 43 if it comes to graphics card codes. Basically some people get this error from like either a driver update or something happened and suddenly your graphics card is no longer there, or you have an issue and your graphics card spits out code 43. This can be fixed with a couple of things. However, this is not a guarantee fix simply because it depends on the situation. So I'm gonna explain two versions of this fix because laptops work a little bit different than computers. So some of you may have seen the videos that I posted in the past. As one of a short clip, or me joking around plugging in a very old graphics card, which was a 590, a GTX 590, which is extremely old, and it was a dual GPU with a onboard SLI bridge. Now SLI is no longer supported, which was already one of the reasons why the driver didn't show up properly, because there's simply no support for it. And especially on Windows 10 and above, some cards are simply too old. So I think everything above, 980, GTX 980 should still work, but yeah, like cards will be out of date eventually, and at some point there will simply be no support for it. So how can you fix this? Now, first of all, if your card is older than an X amount of years, regardless of what you do, it's just not gonna work, simply because the official drivers that were made back then were made for a specific operating system. And if you're running Windows 10 or 11 or something newer, those drivers are simply not made for that kind of operating system. And that's the simple basic line of it. So in that regard, if your card is too old, like if it's older than a 1080 for example, or a 10 series, older than, for example, a 1030 for an example, then forget it. It's probably not going to be supported anymore. Like, even for me, like, I have a laptop here with a very old card. It still works, but that's because I updated my drivers as far as it was possible, and I know exactly what type of graphic card it is. Like, currently, actually, I can show you. You can see what kind of, if my camera focuses, there we go. It's a M50, a GTX or a GT M50, 650, sorry, and 2 gig, and it still works. Like, I can even like show you that it still works. As you can see, it's still there. I can log in, and it still works. And yeah, I'm watching my hero Academia here, so I'll show you the drivers. If I can remember this properly. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm tired, and I'm about to fall asleep, but I wasn't really planning on making a video. So as you can see, there's no explanation marks here, and if we go to display, we see with laptops we have two graphics card or display adapters. This is because laptops in general, as I mentioned in a comment previously on a different video, laptops come usually with two GPUs, one on board and one dedicated. The dedicated is purely if you're playing games or using a heavy load. Therefore, when you're having a card that spits out that error, it usually means that something is wrong in the drivers, or it is unable to communicate properly. As far as laptops is concerned, the option that you can try to fix is update your chipset drivers, and the chipset is basically the entire, well, chipset where the card is plugged into or shuttered onto. So the chipset is basically the brain of the operation, so to say. It tells you where, or the roadmap, so to say. So without my chipset, it will not recognize my onboard graphics, but also not my dedicated graphics, because first it needs to know where to go before it can install the dedicated graphics. And with laptops, it's very tricky because it works nothing like a computer in that department, because it's a mobile version, which means that it's not as powerful as a computer, unless, now granted, there are exceptions, that there are actually a full-blown card into a laptop, but then we're talking about over 3,000 euro laptops. So yeah, let's not dive into that. But if you have, like, for example, a 1080 laptop version and a 1080 computer version, the laptop version will be less powerful than the actual card, because we're talking about a card that's this thick. That's not going to fit in your laptop. It's a lot smaller. Now granted, most of it is heatsink, but still, it draws a lot of power. Like, the power that flows through a computer is way more than a laptop. Now granted, like I said, there are exceptions, but for laptops you need to install your chipset, which also usually automatically installs your onboard graphics, which will be on the chipset, which will be the first driver. Now, for, like I said, this is an old laptop, but you need to have your chipset installed in order to get that up and running. Once your chipset is installed properly, then you can look up for the drivers for the dedicated graphics card. And usually, not all of them, but usually when you're downloading graphics card drivers, it usually says M behind it for mobile. So keep that in mind when you're looking up for drivers. And actually, maybe I can show you. Give me a moment. Alright, there we go. So I can actually show you a little bit better now. So when you look at this, you will see either notebook behind it, like for the 4000 series, but because mine is relatively old, we're gonna go down because it's a 600M, and here we have 600M, but we also have a 600 series. But because this is a laptop, I'm gonna need this version with notebook behind it, or laptop or whatever, but it's an M version. And if you look at here, it also says M, but it depends. Like, some of them isn't indeed a proper version, like a full version, but the majority is an M behind it. But granted, like I said, this is a very, very old laptop. And as far as we can see, like, if we look at the 500 series, for an example, like for the graphics card that I was playing around, if we select the 500 series, then there are some drivers available, but it's a very, very wide range. And as I mentioned before, because the original video that I showed you about the 590, because it's a dual GPU, it has a SLI connector built in the card itself, but SLI is no longer supported, and that's why I couldn't get the driver installed properly. But that's only for that dual GPU card. Any other driver should still function the way as intended, but some drivers may be too old. But yeah, if you look at the 16 series, there's also the 10 series, and if you just really need to look through the list, and you may find it. And if you're unable to find it, like I said, this is the 16 series right there, but there's also a 16 version notebook. And that's probably the one that you're gonna need if you're running on a laptop. So keep that in mind, that these are not the same. And that concludes roughly the laptop. So make sure that when you're installing drivers, you download them from the original source. Like if you know your model number for your laptop, get the latest driver for your chipset. Install your chipset. You may need to update your BIOS, but usually leave that to a professional, because if you mess up with your BIOS, you will not be able to use your laptop ever again. So preferably let a professional update your BIOS. But you can leave, for the majority you can probably leave it. But the only driver you really need to install is your chipset, because it also controls your onboard graphics. Because without it, I can probably show you here as well. If you have an NVIDIA card, at least, if it loads, like I said, old laptop of course, takes a while. There we go. Old laptop. So if you look at here, I can show you earlier. So this is basically where your screen is connected, to the onboard graphics. But we have a second card, and that's a dedicated card. And every time when I'm gonna play a game, it's gonna go from onboard to that. But the connection between the two needs a specific driver in order to like swap the display output. And with laptops, usually is like, as I mentioned, you probably need a M version of the driver. But it depends. You really need to know exactly which driver you need. Usually when you go to the official site where your laptop is from, you get that specific version. Now, as far as the PC version is concerned, usually you get that code when there's a driver problem. Now, what I would recommend is you download a special uninstall tool and completely uninstall the entire driver, including the history of the driver. Like to do a fresh install of the driver. Like usually when you download especially with NVIDIA, it will ask you like, hey, would you like to install a like a standard one, or would you like to update, or like do a custom install? I usually do custom, simply because it will delete all the old drivers for that specific card. Because sometimes when you update a driver and you do not do a fresh install, it may overwrite some things. And if they made a change, and when your laptop or computer is booting back up, there is a chance that it still reads one of the old files, and it will not be compatible with the new ones. And that can also cause the error to pop up. So the majority for computers is completely uninstall the driver and also the history of the driver, like a fresh reinstall. And that should fix your code issue. You can also try to unplug the card and put it into a separate, like a different slot. Sometimes that will fix it as well, and after it reboots a time, it should work. So also another note, and this is kind of like something you need to know, a shutdown is not the same as a reboot. The reason for this is when Windows shuts down, like completely turn off power, like with my computer, as you can see it's completely turned off. When it shuts down, it kind of loads the disk with certain ways. So what it does is that it would save like your settings, so to say, like the kernel or the controller, so to say, from Windows will save some stuff to your drive, and when it loads that drive, it will load specific settings to see, oh, he has this graphics card, this CPU, this motherboard. So it's gonna lock that in place for a quicker boot. So what it does is like, oh, this is what I have. I'm not gonna load anything else because I don't need it. But when you take out the card, for example, and boot it up with a different one, it probably goes like, hey, incompatible, because it's a different device, and it's being stupid that way. That's why they keep telling you do a reboot and not a shutdown, because when you reboot, it completely shuts down that kernel or that controller and wipes it, so to say, as in like it's gonna forget everything. When it restarts, it will load up everything as a like, oh, let's see what we have, like, because when you shut down, like for example, if there's a Windows update and it affects the kernel or the controller, so to say, that basically manage where everything is, so to say, it reloads the boot list, so to say. And with a shutdown, it saves the boot list, but it's not gonna like reorganize it, so to say. So, for example, you make a grocery list, so to say, and you go shopping. You know exactly what you need. But when you restart, you basically wipe your grocery list. So you're gonna need to check your groceries in order to figure out what you need to buy in order to go to the store. That's basically the same with Windows. When you shut it down, it's basically you've written everything down on your grocery list and put it in your pocket or your wallet. And the next day you probably go to the store. Whatever, you're late at night making your list to do groceries in the morning. It's kind of the same like that. And when you restart, it basically throws away the paper and writes a new one. And that's basically what the difference is between a restart and a shutdown. Now, with a shutdown, because you need to shut down in order to take out your card and plop it into a different slot, when you do that, it still thinks that the driver is running on the first slot. But since there's no card there, it's gonna change the registry in Windows, because your card is not running in the first slot but the second slot. So it's gonna redo that driver because it's on a different slot. So it will have a different route, so to say. So that's why sometimes I recommend take out the card, plop it into a different slot to see if it fixes it. If it fixes it, you can plop it back the way it was, and it should fix the issue. Not always, but most of the time this can help. You can't do that with laptops, unfortunately. But with computers, that's something you can try. Now, this doesn't work for everyone. So what you could do is either borrow a graphics card. It doesn't have to be the top of the end one. Just a simple, very cheap, crap-ass graphics cards, as long as you have a video output. It doesn't need to be able to run games or anything, as long as you have a visual screen. Like, you can buy a simple graphics card for like less than 50 euros or something like that. Because the same thing is with what I said earlier. Because it's a different card, it will delete the registry of the driver that is running in that kernel, as I mentioned before, that list. So restart doesn't always work. So like I said, if you plug it out, plug something else in, it resets that registry or that driver. And when you do a fresh reinstall, it wipes that list as well, but you will need to do a restart. But yeah, that's the only advice that I can really give you all, is that when you have that code, there are a couple of things you need to think about. Like, is the card new or not, or is it still being supported? That's one. Second, your card may be busted, like broken, or there's something else going on, like maybe not enough power, or like something else is going on, like overheating or something like that. or it's literally busted and you're lucky enough to have an output. So yeah, or the driver is incompatible, or there's something wrong. You know, something got overwritten by an update, or you didn't shut it down properly, or you got a short circuit somewhere that kind of changed the setting or something like that. Or I don't know. There could be for anything, like data corruption can happen. You know, like these are all factors that play in. So as far as data corruption goes, it depends if you have like a proper hard drive or a SSD. Like SSDs break down eventually because they only can read and write so much. And because it's all electronic, one electrical surge and you're basically screwed. Same with power went out. Stuff like that can happen. Another thing that I would like to note, which is extremely important, which most people don't even realize, is ground your hardware. As in, like if you look at this plug there, that's a normal plug. Same with there, that's a normal plug. So this one is not grounded. So you can see I have a second cable here, and this one is grounded. And that one is also grounded. The reason why it needs to be grounded is because electronics, and especially computers, are extremely sensitive to electricity, like static electricity. If it's not grounded, it will build up, and eventually it's to such an amount that it's gonna jump over, and you don't want that. So what you can do is get one of these, make a plug on it, like a simple plug like that, and plug it in. I think I actually done that with this one, so you can probably see it with this one. Yeah, you see it right there, the white plug. That's my ground plug. And it only has one wire, as you can see here, probably. This one. See, only one wire comes out, and that's the ground wire. And it's basically this that is hooked up to my thingy, to my heater. Because my heater, as you can probably see here, you can see the wire coming there, and it's wrapped around the steel here, because these pipes are grounded. Usually in houses, these pipes, if you have this type of heating, are always grounded. And if they're not grounded, then you're having an issue, because this should always be grounded. And the reason for this is because this becomes hot, and with the fluctuation in temperatures, there's a pretty good chance it will build up electricity, or like static electricity, that needs to be grounded. So that's why in most houses this is always grounded. So that's literally what you can do if you don't have anything else. Like that one is not grounded. So with my dad's computer, it was not grounded. I made a wire like that, like a simple plug like that, and I touched this, and literally the sparks were jumping this far from the wire. So this copper wire and this was literally this far apart, and it was literally jumping over like that. That's how much static electricity was built up on his computer. And it made the computer extremely slow, and it was actually damaging the hardware. Now granted, lucky enough, the PCs that I built are usually built to last, so he was pretty lucky. But yeah, it was building up. You always have a little bit of power that's leaking out, especially with older computers. Especially when you're having a carpet, it generates electricity. So when you're like moving your feet over ground like this, over carpet, you're probably gonna generate electricity. So make sure that your computer or laptop is grounded whenever you can. But especially for computer cases, because they're extremely sensitive to this kind of stuff. And it may damage it even faster. And you may have like other stuff. Like literally, I've seen power supplies blow up and graphics cards go absolutely cray-cray simply because computers were not grounded. So keep that in mind. So that's the tips that I can give you. Yeah, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I will try to answer them. Now, granted, I'm not tech support, but due to experience, I can probably help you out here and there. But yeah, grounding computers is unbelievably important because they're very sensitive. And especially because the majority of today has SSDs. They are even more sensitive to this kind of stuff than hard drives. Like the hard drives that I have, like these type of things. Yeah, well, they are spinning plates, but still, these days they are replaced with SSDs. So yeah, keep that in mind. So get yourself a wire like this if you can. Get a plug, hook it up properly, and in worst case scenarios, hook it up to your radiator, because your radiator should always be grounded. Like I can even show you actually that even that type of stuff is grounded in my meter box. So I can even show you in here how they wired it up. So you see a couple of wires here, but you will also see a ground wire on the pipe, and this pipe specifically is for the gas. So even the gas is hooked up to ground, and you can see that there are more wires coming. So you can also see this one, which is my water pipe, but this water pipe is connected to the boiler, and the boiler is connected to this, and this all connects back to the ground wire, and that's how it's supposed to be. Like you probably see a wire, well, I don't have it here in my house, but you'll probably have a ground wire. I don't have it here. I didn't have it on my old place. Usually you see a ground wire like this one, for example. You can see it here. This is also a ground wire connected to this, and that one should also have a ground wire, but not in this particular place. But there you have it. Those are all ground wires, as you can see. And I can guarantee you that one of these is hooked up to one of those. And that's why I say that your, if I can get this thing back, your pipe for your radiators are grounded. So you can use a copper wire to hook it up there. And that's perfectly safe. So yeah, I hope this helps you out. Like I said, it's just a tip that I would recommend doing if you don't have a proper plug like I do. Now granted, this particular cable is something that I pulled myself, which is grounded, and yeah, it is because my computers have their own group. But in theory, if I plug it in here, I'll as you see, but this one, I have that grounded to my radiator. So yeah, that's the tip I can give you. Like even my AC is hooked up to the ground wire as well. Like ground wire is usually something that does not carry any power unless it has leak power, or if you're having a short circuit. But in general, yeah, it should be safe to touch this. Unless you have like something crazy going on, I wouldn't recommend touching it, but in general, you can hook it up here. It's perfectly fine. So, yeah, I don't know if I have any other places like that's something I cannot reach, but you just have to trust me on that. Feel free to check in your house to see how your setup is. Maybe I have one here. Nope, doesn't look like it, but probably on the attic. Maybe here. Oh, I have a light here now, so you can see we have some more wires coming from up there. But yeah, anyway, yeah, that's it. So thanks for watching. I hope it helps you out, and yeah, like I said, if you get the code, first try to uninstall the driver like completely, reinstall it after you reboot. If it doesn't fix that, if you're on a computer, unplug the card, do a reboot, or plug it into a different slot, try it again, reinstall, and so on. If you're on a laptop, try to uninstall the driver first. If that doesn't work after you reinstall it, make sure that you update or reinstall your chipset. And if that doesn't work, then it might be too old. But or you may have the wrong driver. But make sure that when you're on a laptop or a computer, to install your motherboard or your chipset first, update that. If that doesn't help, try to reinstall the graphics card drivers. And if that still doesn't help and you tried everything, then either your operating system is not up to snuff or up to date, or the card is broken, or simply like no longer supported. It purely depends on what it is. As I said, the 590 that I had is a dual GPU, and that's simply no longer supported. If it was like a 580, perfectly fine. I can even run, I think I actually showed that in a different video, a 280, a GTX 280 was still running perfectly fine with the drivers installed. So yeah, if I can run a GTX 280, not a 2080, no, a 280. Okay, if that still runs, then yeah, you should be able to install the rest of your drivers, unless, like I said, it's a dual GPU, kind of like what I had, because it had an SLI built in, and that is no longer supported. So yeah, anyway, I wish you the best of luck. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. So yeah, I wish you the best of luck, and take care, and I'll see you all later.